Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to take place in Luke's 10th chapter. We're going to try and make it from the 1st to the 24th verse. We've already covered much of the material which comes after it, but herein we read of the commissioning of the 70, and in the previous chapter, the opening verses, he commissions the 12, the apostles. These are disciples. The 12 were known as disciples, but they were eventually elevated to the rank of apostles by the writing of, or the book of Acts. So these were 70 disciples, and the number 12 was so selected because Israel had 12 tribes. These men were to be their representatives, and the 70 were the figure was determined and selected because Moses, when he needed assistance, he was instructed to seek 70 to whom the Spirit parted, and this was during the Exodus generation. So that New Testament number is rooted and related to the Old Testament, and much of what happens after the 9th chapter, it's after the calling and commission of the 12, we read of a host of things such as Peter's confession, the transfiguration, the visit to Samaria, the healing of a demon or a sick boy of sorts. So there's a lot that happens in between, but what we read in the opening verses of the 10th chapter brings us back. A lot of the instructions and of their respective commissions were parallel and overlap. So let's read them. Opening verse. And after this, the master appointed 70 others and sent them 2 by 2 ahead of him into every city and place where he himself was about to go. So he gathered the 70, sent them in teams of 2 to where he intended to go, where he wanted the good news message to spread. He could not spread it himself. He could not be in more than one place at any one given time, being a creature of the flesh, so he relied on others, and the spread of the kingdom ultimately comes through Yahweh's grace and power, but he does deign to provide it to human servants. There is very little of God's work on the earth that he does not accomplish via submitted human servants. Then he said to them, The harvest indeed is great, but the workers are few. Therefore pray to the master of the harvest to send out workers into his harvest. So even though he had this team of 70, they were not enough. The harvest was exceedingly great beyond any one man and any number of capacity as they had capacity to reap. So they had to pray for more workers. Now you'll never see a Christian spectator praying for other workers. It is always someone who is engaged in the ministry activity, in the spiritual warfare, in the work of the kingdom. They are the ones who are working, and the demand will always exceed the supply. There is, the spreading of the kingdom across the earth cannot realistically happen because there's just not enough number of submitted or capable human beings. But we are to pray for laborers to assist us in our endeavors, because it's not, the Christian life is not a solitary, it's a communal dimension that we must cultivate. Go, see, I send you out as lambs in the midst of wolves. So he's frankly telling them that he's sending them out into hostile territory. The world will reject the message because the message condemns the sins of the world. And lambs, that entails an element. He is the Lamb of Elohim. So the Lamb is willing and prepared to sacrifice his life unto others. But when they abide in the Good Shepherd, he will protect them from the sheep, the wolves that will otherwise devour them and rout. But he's telling them not to expect open arms or welcome everywhere you go. The gospel is a disturber and a divider. Do not take a purse, nor a bag, nor sandals, and greet no one along the way. So that's an act of faith, to walk out with no money, with the expectation that those who you minister will provide for you en route. They will provide your hospitality, your food, your shelter, etc. But that is really a leap of faith. And he told the 12 the same thing. They were not to accept money for their teachings. And none of the apostles, I believe, did. But Paul was realistic enough to realize that the kingdom, that the church cannot spread as fast or effectively as it could in the absence of professional ministers. We'll get to that more fully as we perhaps read the 7th verse, the 5th verse. "In whatever house you enter, first say peace unto this house." So that's just good manners. You want to be welcome and well-wishing when you are welcomed into a home. No host is going to refute a guest who wishes them peace. That's something everyone could use a little bit of more. "And if indeed a son of peace is there, your peace shall rest on it, and if not, it shall return to you. So what they have and belongs to them will spread unto others. The peace will gravitate and be bounded and relay from the sons of peace to the next. But if they're not a son of peace, your peace is intact. You just bring it to the next station because they've already rejected the message. They've identified themselves as children of wrath or slaves of sin, so they're not sons of peace and therefore unworthy or unmeriting of our additional attention. "And stay in the same house, eating and drinking whatever with them, for the laborer is worthy of his wages. Do not move from house to house." The laborer is worthy of his wages. Now he's not authorizing them to accept salary or commission or anything like that, but the food and hospitality, the food and the drink and the meals and the shelter will be their just compensation for doing what they did. That isn't a whole lot, but it is certainly enough. And he's telling them not to move from house to house because they got to stick to and gravitate to the houses they build and are edifying and worthy, the ones where the sons of peace dwell and the message can penetrate. "And into whatever city you enter, and they receive you, eat whatever is placed before you." So we are to be accepting and welcoming and hospitable to those who initiate the same graces and virtues to us. We are, a city that welcomes us. We can eat whatever, they're going to not only welcome us, but feed us for having gone there. And it's not unrighteous to eat that food. "And heal the sick there, and say to them, the kingdom of Elohim has come near to them." So he's promising them and authorizing them and delegating them the power to heal the sick. They can do it in his name, but apart from his power that is attached to the name, no healing can occur or take place. So these were ordinary men who were endowed by extraordinary powers, natural men operating as bastions of supernatural force to heal. And they're to tell them that the kingdom of Elohim is in their midst. It's right around the corner. It's in fact with them in their hearts as they live here and now, even though the full and final realization of the long expected and blessed abode of the kingdom will not perhaps come. It may come in this lifetime, but we have to prepare that for the fact that it might not. "Into whatever city you enter, and they do not receive you, go out into its streets and say, even the dust of your city which clings to us, we wipe off against you. But know this, that the kingdom of Elohim has come near to you." So the traditional way of a Jew to show his contempt or disrespect for Gentile cities was to wipe the dust off of them against them, and that is what the Christians are to do to the Jews, but they're nevertheless to tell them the same thing that they had told those who had been more amenable to their message and accepting of its contents, that the kingdom of Elohim is right around the corner, it's coming close, and it is in fact here, but you unfortunately missed it. "And I say to you that it shall be more bearable for Sodom in that day than for that city." Sodom is the ancient epicenter of iniquity, which was destroyed in the days of Abram, as he was then known, or he might have even been Abraham by that point, but his nephew Lot was in the city, and Yahweh frankly informs Abraham that he's going to destroy the city of Sodom and to get Lot out of there, but Abraham petitions him calling him the righteous judge. If there are even 50 people left in it, will you destroy it? And he assures him that he will not. Eventually that number winnows down to 10, and he receives the same assurance. So therein we can gather that there were no righteous people, no innocent people in the city of Sodom, which was notorious for, amongst other things, for homosexuality. That's where our term sodomite derives from. And they were destroyed with fire and brimstone for their detestable iniquities. And you know what? They're going to be better off than those who reject the message that they proclaim. Woe to you, Chorazin! Woe to you, Bethsaida! For if the miracles which were done in you had been done in Zor and Zidon, they would have repented long ago, sitting in sackcloth and ashes. So he's comparing two cities to two Gentile cities, I believe, Zor and Zidon. The Gentiles, had they heard the message, they would have received it and repented. We witnessed this in Jonah's evangelical outburst in the city of Nineveh, an entire city from the king on down, top to bottom, all the way to the animals, engage in citywide, king-commanded fasting, no eating, no drinking water, and they were to adorn themselves in sackcloth and pray out mightily for forgiveness, and they received it because their repentance was sincere. But the Jews who had the advantages and the background and the privileges of being recipients to special revelation were not as amenable to these Gentiles who had a blank slate. So it is entirely possible, and in fact, when we read in the Good Samaritan parable, which comes after this, he proves that those who were despised by Jews as aliens, heretics, and outsiders could surpass them in good works. But it shall be more bearable for Zor and Zidon at the judgment than from you. So we take it that this Zor and Zidon did not repent, but they're going to be better off at the judgment. That is nothing to look forward to when you're going to be worse off than Sodom and Gomorrah, which were destroyed by fire and brimstone. So we got to take this message seriously. We got to take it to heart. We got to apply it to mind. We have to work it out in our lives and in the lives of others and spread it. And that's not any one person's job. It is a team effort. Hence, we must always, always pray for more laborers to be sent to assist us in our endeavors. He who hears you hears me. He who rejects you rejects me. And he who rejects me rejects him who sent me. So he's a great Democrat. He treats his servants as the effective equivalent, as if he were himself. The least among them his followers are to be an accurate reflection at the judgment for how we treated him. So he does share the reproach and the stigma and the pain and the suffering, and also the joy and the spreading of the message and conversion and all that stuff belongs to him and cannot come apart from him. But if we reject him, we're not only rejecting him, but the Father who sent him. Now, the Jews claim to be devoted and loyal worshipers of Yahweh, but they could not process that the Son was his their most visible and dramatic and fullest and final form of revelation of who he is and what he is like. So they struggle, the majority of them anyway, struggled with that. And the 70 returned with joy, saying, Master, even the demons are subject to us in your name. So we kind of read the commission, then we don't read much details of what happened out here. We know that he sent them 2 by 2 all across the promised land, because his ministry, his earthly ministry, as outlined in Matthew 10:5-6, was to the lost sheep of Israel. So he would have sent them 2 by 2, and they came back glowing with positive reports. They were astonished that the demons were powerless to control those whom they had exorcised out of through the power of his name. So this is something altogether new for him. An ordinary demon is more powerful than an ordinary human, but they were ordinary people who were endowed with extraordinary and supernatural capacities. And he said to them, I saw Satan falling out of the heaven at lightning. So they're seeing a string of victories. They're seeing an inexorable progression of positive results and evangelical success. But he's connecting it to the wider war between good and evil, the cosmic struggle between Elohim and Satan. And he sees Satan being defeated. And of course, eventually he's going to be brought down to the grave. And I actually forgot to read verse 15, so I'm going to just read that now. And you, Capernaum, who are exalted to the heavens, shall be brought down to the grave. The reason I wanted to reread that one, because that mimics the language in Isaiah's 14th chapter of Lucifer. He tried to exalt himself to the throne of heaven at the height of the assembly to where he didn't belong, but he was brought down to the grave. So that connects to the Satan allusion in the 18th verse. Moving on to the 19th. See, I give you the authority to trample on serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy, and none at all shall hurt you. Serpents and scorpions were dangers and dreads in the ancient world. They were venomous and poisonous. The serpent was how Satan, the form under which Satan initially infiltrated the mind and heart of man to transgress the commandments of Yahweh. But not only literal serpents, but spiritual serpents, they would be inferior powers when they basked in his power. No injury. They could trample over them with immunity. No injury at all would come to them. But do not rejoice in this, that the spirits are subject to you, but rather rejoice because your names have been written in the heavens. So there's nothing wrong with rejoicing at the obvious extraordinary fact that demons are subjected to our command. We can control them, they can't control us. But a far greater priority and more worthy of more praise is the fact that your name has been written. The Greek word means officially inscribed in the heavens, and that's also the book of heavens, the book of life, and etc. The book of remembrance, it's alternately known as. So their names are recorded in there. That means their salvation is secure and sealed, and that is the greatest miracle of all, the salvation of a sinner. Not the defeat of Satan or his minions, but the salvation of the sinner is the greatest miracle in the universe. In that hour Yahshua exalted in the Spirit and said, I praise you, Father, Master of the heavens and of the earth, that you have hidden these from clever and learned ones, and revealed them to children. Yes, Father, because thus it was well-pleasing in your sight. So the Father, whose wisdom, his foolishness, even though he doesn't have an element of foolishness in him, on his most foolish light or most foolish lens, he is infinitely, exponentially wiser than the wisdom of men, and he conceals certain truths from the cosmopolitans, the sophisticates, the educated, the academics. Those formerly trained at the rabbi schools could not grasp what these unlettered disciples, without any formal training outside of the calling, the irresistible calling of the one who had sent them. He himself was not trained, but he clearly expressed profound truth, and he was giving thanks that the ones who seemed least likely to receive it from a worldly lens were in fact receiving it, and they were putting the wise to shame. And all has been delivered to me by my Father, and no one knows who the Son is except the Father, who the Father is except the Son, and he to whom the Son wants to reveal. There's actually a lot to digest there. The deliverance is a salvific term, and no one can know who the Son is. The Son and the Father are inseparable and unconnected. He is the Father's fullest and final form of revelation on earth. So to know him is to know the Father, that is one and the same. And none can know the Father or the Son except to whom the Son wants to reveal to him. So his choice always antedates our own. It's so if we want him to reveal more of himself to us, we can call that out in prayer, and if we ask with sincerity intent, he will not deny it. But here it says that he wants to reveal. So these men were specifically selected for a purpose, and he knew what he was doing. And turning to his disciples, he said separately, Blessed are the eyes that see what you see. So his disciples, now these 70 are not identified as disciples, so we can imagine that he's referring to the 12. Often he gave them more intimate teachings, and they were privileged to exposure of more intimate access. They were privy to more of the secrets than anyone else. So he's telling them, blessed are the eyes that see what you see. He's framing the fact that they are blessed to see what they are seeing and to behold what they are beholding, because as he reads in the next verse, the final verse of the chapter, or the range we'll be covering today, for I say to you that many prophets and kings have wanted to see what you see and have not seen it, and to hear what you hear and have not heard it. So they are privileged to access to a revelation whose quality was greater than anything that any king or prophet had ever known. What the Old Covenant prophets knew, they knew more than them. They knew more than kings, so they were really privileged to be present and alive at this moment in time, as are we, because we have an even fuller depository of revelation than the early Christians did, who lived before the writing of the New Testament. So that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. Stay tuned until next time. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.